Welcome on into the Cougar Tracks podcast powered by KSLSports.com. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. Happy as always to have you on board of the podcast wherever and however you're listening or watching the show. Appreciate you being on board with me today. The Big 12 spring business meetings wrapped up here in Orlando, Florida. Going to give you a recap of everything that took place and some news and notes as the Big 12 heads into the summertime, and it's a little bit of downtime. Well, I don't want to say downtime because it's going to be a busy June for a lot of the football teams and pretty much every team with recruiting. But going to unpack everything that transpired at these spring meetings as the league moves forward and turns the page, honestly, till 2025, 2026 athletic year. You can follow me on X, Mitch_Harper, Instagram, TikTok as well. Follow KSL Sports at KSL Sports. And subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. So the big storyline coming out of the Big 12 spring business meetings was the college football playoff. It's a hot topic everywhere in college sports right now. 6 hours east out in Destin. The SEC had their meetings, and they were pretty vocal about their feelings on a playoff. They haven't attached themselves to a specific format, the SEC, but they have the memorandum of understanding that they're going to be in charge along with the Big Ten, who the Big Ten we never hear from. We never hear anything from the Big Ten. It was kind of interesting, honestly, getting ready for these meetings. I was kind of researching what some of the other leagues were saying about topics, and the Big Ten had their meetings in California last week, and not a peep, nothing. We didn't hear a thing from anyone, and, you know, they're one of the power conferences that hold the memorandum of understanding that they're going to control things, and we just don't hear anything from that league. But we did hear quite a bit from the Big 12 this week, and the playoff format that they are pushing is the 5+11. And I think that format makes a lot of sense. And for those that don't understand and get into the minutia of everything college football playoff, let me get you up to speed, because I understand all this can be a little bit, you just go, man, this is a grind. We've been talking about the playoff format for what feels like years. And, you know, what's it going to be next? The 5+11 is 5 automatic qualifiers with 11 at-large bids. And I talked with Kalani Sitake about it, Brian Santiago, BYU athletic director, and they all support the Big 12. And Kalani Sitake noted that he thinks the 5+11 makes a lot of sense for this conference. And I think it does too. I think the Big 12, now the 5-11 model runs the risk of you only getting one bid. I mean, in some years, maybe you could get no bids if you're not one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions. I'd be pretty stunned if that happened, but they kind of teetered on the edge a little bit at times last year, it felt like, where there was conversations on the outside of people saying, are they going to be one of the 5 highest conference champions? I think the Big 12, though, is going with the right approach because, again, I feel like the 4-4-2-2-1, which is 4 automatic bids to the SEC, 4 automatic bids to the Big 10, 2 to the Big 12, 2 to the ACC, it accepts that you are second tier. And proving yourself every single season is going to be the task in front of the Big 12. You know, these next 6 years with the new media rights, and we'll talk about that a little bit later here, that's going to be critical for this league to really rewrite the narrative of what Big 12 football is. And you got to step it up. You got to win big. Now, are you going to get the benefit of the doubt to get scheduling agreements in the non-conference with Big 10 and SEC teams? I'm not banking on it. Utah's got some with LSU, Wisconsin, Arkansas. BYU has no Big Ten SEC agreements until the 2030s. It's all pretty much Pac-12, ACC. There's not much for BYU in its future non-conference schedules with the SEC and the Big Ten. So you're going to be limited on that standpoint, especially if the SEC and Big Ten do form some sort of scheduling agreement. But if it's 5+11, you probably end up seeing the SEC stay at 8 conference games and continue to do what they've been doing every single year. So I think that What I like, though, about this format is that it gives everyone a chance going into the season, and nothing is predetermined before the year kicks off. The thought of a, fourth place SEC team automatically getting into the playoff, crazy to me. It didn't make sense at all. I've been for, a little bit of expansion with the college football playoff. I've come around to the 12-team format because I think it just opens things up and it creates an ability to get more teams in and the feeling of getting in that playoff, because like the NCAA men's basketball tournament, getting a bid into the tournament is a big deal. That's the stuff that you put on banners and you say, hey, you acknowledge in the history books you went to the NCAA tournament. You go to the college football playoff, that's a big deal. And that's something you can sell to your boosters, your fan base. Hey, building momentum, getting ready for the next year, even though didn't go far in the playoff, maybe one and done. But getting to the college football playoff says you are one of the best teams in the sport, and a 5+11 model guarantees that. You're not going to probably have much debate of teams 17 and 18. Like, come on. If you're getting in that 16-team field, you are one of the best teams in college football, and every single year that model, I think, can give that. And so I like that the Big 12 was pushing for that, and Brett Yormark talked about it today, that he was even hearing, SEC coaches, there were reports out in Destin that they were kind of gaining support of the 5+11 model. Again, it's all in the control of the SEC and Big Ten, but there does have to be collaborative effort in regards to that college football playoff format and how they go moving forward. I thought the college football playoff was a huge story. No private equity for the Big 12. They issued a statement. Brett Yormark addressed that in his remarks on Friday. So no private equity for the league for now. And I'll admit that goes way over my head, but it does feel a little dicey, a little bit scary. But there's been reports of Big 12 ADs meeting with the Project Rudy folks, College Sports Commission, or the Project Rudy that, is a potential super league, 70 teams. There's been meetings of that, but not sure. I think no private equity is the right way to go moving forward. NCAA Tournament, Charlie Baker, NCAA president, he talked about 72 or 76 teams in future NCAA tournaments. That's the number they're kind of looking at for expansion. It's a shame because I think 68 teams is honestly perfect. As much as I was talking about college football and the access, I think 68's great, but I think if you do expand to 72 or 76 teams, a league like the Big 12 in basketball is going to benefit greatly from that because they're probably going to occupy at least one, maybe two of those bids going forward. Transfer portal was a big topic too. January is the window, the 10-day window is what coaches in football want, like that January 2nd to January 12th. That's the time frame that they would like to see be the only window for the transfer portal because the spring window caused a lot of headaches for coaches. So January 2nd to January 12th, I think, is kind of the momentum that coaches want to see with this portal. I thought it was interesting, too. Baylor president Linda Livingstone, she noted that it was very collaborative in the league meetings this week and maybe some of the best ever. I just think that it also helps the league that they have no onboarding with new members. This was the first full year where they're just focusing on the membership, building it up, and taking it to greater heights instead of, okay, let's get everyone up to speed. Everyone's been involved with this league now for at least a year. And obviously the administrators and ADs and presidents, they've been around for some time. Since the move happened, they immediately joined a lot of the meetings. But there was no onboarding this year. So it's just hit the ground running for this upcoming year and take it to greater heights. And I think that allows for more, efficiency with the meetings and things like that. So I thought that was kind of noteworthy. Brett Yormark also discussed international play. There's going to be a game in Paris involving Baylor basketball. There's going to be a baseball game in Mexico. There was a lot of talk a couple years ago when Brett Yormark joined the league about Big 12 Mexico, and there was going to be a game between Houston and Kansas in basketball. That didn't materialize because they kicked that to the curb a little bit, or just kind of put it on pause because of all the stuff from a year ago with House versus NCAA, and that's still ongoing. So that hasn't been at the forefront of everyone's minds. But he kind of leaves that door open for international opportunities for the Big 12 going forward. I think it'd be great to see BYU football play an international game. I think if anyone in this league that would be well served to play an international game, it's BYU because, well, BYU's got an international following. And I think depending on the country, BYU would show up. So if they did do the whole Big 12 Mexico thing, I think BYU fans would show up in big numbers if it was down in Mexico. And I'm sure there'd be members of the church that would show up too. So to me, BYU is one of the few teams that it makes sense. I know Kansas State, Iowa State is going to Ireland coming up in August. I'm really curious to see what the turnout's going to be for that game. But it's really expensive for these schools to take a team and teams overseas internationally. Ireland's a big lift, but it should be a really cool game that I'm curious to see. But these international games are definitely still potentially on the table for the Big 12 as they exit their spring business meetings. And I teased it, the media rights. That's a big piece to the Big 12 this year because it's the new media rights that ultimately secured the future of the Big 12. If you didn't have this new media rights, you don't have a Big 12. You could have gone to the big Pac-12 potentially. Who knows what could have been this media rights that begins this year, 2025, 2026. It secured the future for the league, and it's a 6-year media rights. And Brett Yormark talked about it. I asked him directly, what's going to change with this? He noted ESPN and Fox continue to be the primary sponsors of, the media rights. And then there's games sub-licensed to TNT Sports, which we talked about. But he also noted NBC as well, which was kind of new. I did not heard that. And even Brian Thornton, in my interview with him, VP of men's basketball in the league, he noted NBC as, a possible platform for basketball games with Peacock being in the mix. So the Big 12's got a lot of different media partners that they can turn to. Now, the big thing is that none of them make the Big 12 the A-tier league. That's kind of the big question to me going forward is what are they going to do to get more visible windows for the Big 12? Now, to Brett Yormark's point today, there was a lot more Friday night Fox college football games. Last year, I think there was only 2 or 3. It was Arizona, Kansas State, Utah, UCF, and everything else was pretty much Big 10. This year, they got 4 Fox college football Friday matchups, which those are pretty good number broadcasts. You get some good numbers on a network television spot on a weeknight. It can be a good TV window. And then they got more ESPN, not ESPN2, not ESPNU, ESPN News. It was ESPN in the early TV kick times, which BYU got a few of those with Stanford in a late night, BYU Colorado in a late night. So ESPN, there's going to be some late windows, but BYU is a team that thrives in that. I'm curious to see really how they continue to progress with maybe getting more, 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time kickoffs if they can carve out some space there because you got the SEC with their games of the week in the prime time. They got that 1:30 spot as well. How do these networks fit in the Big 12? Because there's still $2 billion, 2 billion reasons for these networks, ESPN and Fox in particular, to care heavily in the interest and the success of the Big 12 going forward. And with it having potential access, this league, to the playoff, as whoever their champion ends up going to the playoff, high stakes are always going to be on the line in the Big 12. So it should be make for good television. But I did think the NBC piece was an interesting little tidbit coming out of these Big 12 spring business meetings. But all in all, a pretty productive week, and it was fun to see a lot of the BYU personnel. BYU President C. Shane Reese, BYU Athletics Director Brian Santiago, BYU football coach Kalani Sitake, BYU men's basketball coach Kevin Young, and BYU women's basketball coach Lee Kamart. I appreciate all their time they carved out for me. Even I talked with some Utah personnel as well, Mark Harlan, Alex Jensen too. Just really enjoyed this time here at the Big 12 Spring Business Meeting. It's a lot of fun. I mean, for any media member, to go to these sort of things, it's a great opportunity. So it's a lot of fun, and it was a really good time. And I think for the BYU side of things, there were just some really good insights into the program. I thought Brian Santiago really laid out some exciting outlooks for BYU athletics and his vision. I come away thinking Brian Santiago is going to be highly competitive and want BYU to get to the highest levels possible. And I talked about that a couple weeks ago when he got introduced, but Brian I think there's a good vibe about him, and he's known already by a lot of these Big 12 ADs already. They know of him, so there's a little bit of a relationship already. It's not this, well, who are you? Who's this guy? I think maybe that helps the cause with collaborating, and down the road when you're talking about future schedules and having a network of people to turn to. And he was pretty candid in my interview with him about, his relationships, his network of people. I thought it was a really insightful interview, and I highly recommend you go check that out on YouTube and on this podcast feed. But, I think Brian Santiago gets maybe a little bit misunderstood. And, it's a bigger spotlight now in the athletics director role. And I'm really curious to see how he takes ownership of that position and makes it his own. Because for a while, it's going to be, he was Tom Holmoe's wingman. But I already feel like he's putting his own impression already onto the position. I'm really curious to see what Brian Santiago does going forward in that role. Talked with BYU football head coach Kalani Sitake. And, we hit on a variety of topics. And we talked about the spring portal window, the college football playoff. There's excitement for this team, and it's, again, a quiet confidence of what this team could potentially be. There's obviously the big question mark about quarterback Jake Retzlaff and the allegations in that civil lawsuit filed against him from Jane Doe AG. And I asked everyone at BYU, President Shane Reese, AD Brian Santiago, head coach Kalani Sitake, just what's the status of Jake, and they all pointed to BYU's statement, and I understand. But I had to ask the question. I think they understand that and respect that side of it. Going back to Kalani, though, I think that Jake or not, whatever that ends up being with Jake, it's a football team that Kalani believes could be pretty good. And you hear some of that commentary in my interview with him. So that was good stuff. And I really enjoyed my chat with BYU President Shane Reese. Had about 20 minutes with him and talking about his vision of BYU and how they move going forward in the House versus NCAA when that settlement, if it does ever happen, and we're still all waiting for that. And that was kind of one of the downsides to these meetings. It would have been perfect had there been the settlement already in place so we could get a lot more intricacies and nuances of everything. It's all kind of on pause right now. Hopefully, by Big 12 football media days, we can get more into the weeds about the logistics of how this is all going to work with House versus NCAA. Because it's all on pause right now. But I did talk to President Reese about maybe framework of what that's going to look like for BYU, their competitiveness in the NIL space, how that's viewed by him, the perceptions out there, his hiring of Brian Santiago. Again, really insightful. And that'll be up here on the podcast feed. And then also we'll have that playing on Cougar Sports Saturday coming up this weekend here from Orlando, noon to 3. On Cougar Sports Saturday, noon to 3 Mountain Time for all of you, of course, in the Mountain Time Zone. So that'll be on KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the BYU Cougars. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast. Been a great week here in Orlando. Going to head back here to Utah. Get ready for coming up on Monday. It'll be the Kalani Sitake, Kyle Whittingham, Kidney Cars Golf Classic. They'll address the media and things like that there. I will not be at that, but there will be some activities going on, and then June's going to be loaded with recruiting. It's going to be a busy month. Summer camps begin for BYU football, so a whole lot to unpack coming up next month. It never ends, right? It's always ongoing when it comes to college sports. It's 365, and we're here to document all of it here on Cougar Tracks, here on KSL and KSL News Radio. So we'll talk to you next time here on the Cougar Tracks podcast. Signing off from Orlando. I'll talk to you next time.